It's the holiday season, which means that it's that time of year when your friends, family, and significant other ask you for holiday gift ideas. And you could certainly use all sorts of great hobby things this holiday season, but why is your brain coming up blank? Don't worry, it happens to me too. But I've got your back, and today we're going to go through what should be on your hobby holiday gift list and what shouldn't. Happy holidays there, you wonderful paint licker, you. You know, it can be difficult for boring normal people to come up with gift ideas for weirdo hobbyists like ourselves. As I found myself writing my wish list for Santa Claus this year, I realized maybe there would be some benefit to expand this list so you would know what things that you should ask for this year, or just things that you can buy for yourself. Now, I've broken down these gift ideas into 3 separate categories. Don't worry, that's all going to make sense in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about what thing I don't think you should ask for this holiday season. More models. Now hear me out. Now the reason why I don't ask for models as gifts each year for holidays or my birthday is because I like to have a little bit of investment in if I really need that new kit. If I know I'm excited to paint it in the very near future, or I know I need it for my army or new game I want to start playing, then I can buy it myself. But if I'm just throwing lists off the bow for anyone to get for me, I typically find I ask for things I don't really need. All right, the first category are things that you can get from a home improvement store, like your local hardware store or a big box store like Home Depot or Lowe's. Now, there's 2 good reasons for this category. Number 1, other people think that you're actually using your gifts for home improvement reasons, which you're not. Or 2, you can simply ask for a gift card to one of these stores and pick up this stuff you otherwise probably didn't buy yourself. All right, first things first is high grit sandpaper. It is always beneficial to have some sandpaper on hand for building and cleaning your models. My go-to grit is 600 grit. It's nice and fine, so it actually works as a fine finishing, but it's got enough tooth to it that it cleans up most mold lines and little nubs easily enough. If you're a particular crazy person, you can go all the way up to 2500 grit to wet sand your models so they are as smooth as a baby's bottom before a brush ever touches them. Speaking of sanding, there is another tool I now find myself unable to live without, and that is a 3M sanding sponge. Specifically these ones that have an angle on each side, meaning they can get into nice tight areas. I find this great for when I'm building lots of terrain or 3D prints of big terrain pieces. This is really easy to clean things up quickly with one tool. Next up is good old painter's tape. Now, if you wanted to do any airbrushing and masking work or dealing with plinths of any kind, you want to mask off the areas that you don't want to get paint on later. And this stuff is basically the same thing as the really expensive masking tape for hobby use. See, I always keep a roll of this in my hobby desk. I will say that it does pay to get the slightly more expensive stuff. So when you peel the line back, you get a nice crisp edge. Some of the cheap painter's tape will bleed your paint through. Now, everyone appreciates a good bottle of booze for Christmas, but this stuff, even when mixed with Mountain Dew, does not taste so great. I'm talking about isopropyl alcohol. It's always great to have a bottle of this stuff on hand, whether it's to clean up your 3D prints if you have a 3D printer, or to clean out your airbrush or any other kind of mistakes you've made on your workspace with paint getting somewhere or spills. A little bit of this stuff and a rag will clean it right up. One of my favorite things to look at in big home improvement stores are all their storage bins for parts, like nuts, bolts, and screws. But I like to use them for hobby reasons. This one here I actually found at a garage sale, but it's what I keep all of my 3D printed bits for basing in, nice and categorized so I know what I want when I want it. We got water bottle lids that I can mix washes in, some corks I could use as painting handles. Oh, this was a bunch of models that I started kit bashing and I forgot that I own. I mentioned painter's tape before, but another kind of tape I find myself using a lot is double-sided foam tape, also by 3M. Now, I used to use this to adhere all of the models that I paint to just a wooden dowel for an easy painting handle. And if you don't have a painting handle, it's great for that. But nowadays, I just use it for awkward models that are bigger or funny shapes to adhere them to something to hold on to while I paint. I've just found that I use this almost every single month, so having one on hand is never a bad idea. Probably the weirdest thing you can ask for that we're going to go over today for a gift is a single slate floor tile. This is a single bathroom tile that I've smashed up with a hammer between two towels, and then I just threw it into a tub here. I've got a lot of different varieties of sizes, and this looks like natural slate and rock out in the environment. It's a great, really cheap terrain tool for all your basing needs. A great stocking stuffer someone can give you, as long as they don't need to travel on a plane to get to you, are some extra hobby blades. I don't know how many times I've broken a hobby blade, gone to get a backup, and I didn't have one. So that's great to have, as well as extra little bits for your pin vise. These little drill bits are amazing. You do tend to break them now and again. So whether you're using a standard pin vise to pin your models, or you use this fancy wow stick that I just love, having extra bits is always a good idea. And the last product on the home improvement store one is probably the stupidest thing on this list, and that is a box of paper clips. Now, if you're smart, you just steal a box of these from your work. But if you can't do that, just asking for a single box of jumbo paper clips will last you the rest of your hobby life. Just making sure you can pin models to your hobby holder is a great thing, or pin together some hard to assemble metal models. Having one box of these on hand will never steer you wrong. All right, the second category are things that you probably need, but you don't want to spend the money on to buy for yourself. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about are metals. Now, there are a lot of interesting metal objects that we can use for our hobby. Some of them are purposely for our hobby, and some of them are in the jewelry aisle at your local craft store. Things like 2-scale chain, a couple of different sizes based on your chain needs for the project. Even small copper or lead wire that you can bend to the certain shape that you want, whether you want it to look like electrical bolts going over your model, or you want some other weird spider webs or something. Having those kinds of really, really thin metal wire is great. And finally, really cool things like mesh, where it looks like a chain link fence has been broken down on your base, or even a solid piece of brass or copper that's thin enough that you can bend to use as a banner. These metal things can sometimes be expensive, and that's why we don't tend to buy them a lot for ourselves. So just send somebody an Amazon link and make them buy it for you. All right, now that we're done talking about metal, let's talk about plastic, specifically plastic card. This stuff works very similarly to the plastic models that we build and play with, except that we have a lot more options to use this stuff to craft all sorts of interesting debris or terrain bits, or even whole buildings, new aspects to the tanks or backpacks or guns our models wear. The world is your oyster with this stuff, so it's great to have some sheets on hand. They even come in interesting shapes like tubes and squares that we could cut out to be exposed tubing or piping or sewage lines in our models. Having a variety of these on hand is great, but of course, you don't want to spend money on those versus a new box of Space Marines. Today's video was brought to us by the keepers of the closet, the high kings of the hangar, the warlords of the wardrobe. Into the AM. It's the end of the year, but Into the AM is not resting on their laurels. Oh no, they have a bunch of new designs. I am particularly partial to this dark samurai motif. And also, the 1970s vintage comic book style spaceman kind of bangs. It's been awesome working with Into the AM throughout 2024. It always makes me proud to work with a company that not only makes great products, but products that I use every day. I mean, I got to help design my own exclusive Into the AM Ninjan shirt, and working with the artists and staff for this project really helped me understand how much passion they have for what they do. And my design is still available. Should you want to pick one up, just use the link below. Speaking of links, that link down in the video description will take you over to Into the AM, and you'll get to see all the great deals they have going on now, like their bundle specials and the mystery sale. And as always, make sure you use promo code NINJAN at checkout. No matter what sale they have going on, that will give you an extra 10% off. Thanks, Into the AM. Now let's get back to the video. Next up is lighting. Now, I've got a whole video on looking at different kinds of lighting for the hobby, but I will say this. If you find that your hobby light is kind of lackluster, or you're just using a standard bulb and a standard hobby desk lamp, please consider investing in a new hobby light. And what better time than to ask someone to buy that $100 lamp for you? Oh, here's a good one for your cheap brother-in-law. These little pop widgets. These things are amazing to put in your washes, your shades, your contrast or speed paints in to just work quickly through projects. Let them dry on these little pop widgets, pop them out, and then the dried paint just flakes off and you can start using them again. Oh, here's a niche one, but I think it's worth mentioning. A single tube of heavy body acrylic, specifically titanium white. Now, the reason why I'm specifically suggesting high quality, heavy body artist acrylic white paint is because it is so much more vibrant and opaque because it's not thinned down like our miniature paint. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use regular white miniature paint, but when you want that brightest shine on a gem or the glint of an eye or the brightest point on a shining sword, I use pure heavy body white for that. This will make your rest of your white paints look gray in comparison, and it really brings an extra dimension of pop and brightness to any project. Talked about this one a lot of times, but since these are under 20 bucks, it's an easy gift ask if you don't own one yet. That's just a cheap pair of magnifiers. Honestly, I put an extra pair of these magnifiers on my hobby list this year just so I have a backup or a pair I can throw in my travel kit for going to conventions. They are that valuable and I can't paint without them because I'm old. Last thing that you probably need but don't want to buy yourself are the color cubes. Now, I've done a couple of videos showcasing the color cubes, but if you haven't picked one up yet, now's great. Just have somebody else. I'll put the link down below for these. These are a great way to take all the burden off yourself on what color schemes to use when painting a model. Or if you just want to get good inspiration for a brand new army scheme, you can look through all of these, maybe test a few out and figure out what would be best for your next army. Our third and final category are cool specialty miniature painting hobby products that would be great as stocking stuffers. You know, earlier I mentioned that I used to use double-sided foam tape and just a regular wooden dowel as my hobby holders for painting, but that all changed once I started using the Red Grass Games hobby holder. I freaking love this thing. There's so many things that it does exactly right. The mounting putty that they use is the exact level of tackiness that holds the model firm without being sticky after you take it off. The fact that you can buy a bunch of the caps and just have a couple of handles and swap out models as you're painting them just via the cap. And they now have different cap sizes. Okay, it's just a little thing. It's not very expensive. It goes in the stocking, but honestly, it's my favorite hobby holder. So it's an easy thing to give to the hobbyist that you love. Or yourself. Next thing to ask for is just a couple of paints from maybe a paint brand you haven't tried yet. Now, you'll want to be really specific in this and say, I would like a bright green and maybe a vibrant yellow or something like that, so they're not just left to their own devices to what colors you want. Now, what I would personally suggest is to pick up one or two of the Artist Signature Series sets from Pro Acryl, not because I have my own Ninjon set, but I do. But these are 6 unique colors that these artists use all the time and they really love. So it's great to test out colors that other painters really like, and maybe you'll grow to find some that you like too. And you're supporting other artists, so that's a great thing. Other than Vince. You don't have to support Vince. Most of our products today do not apply to airbrushing at all, but I do have this one little thing I want to mention, and that would be this little metal airbrush cleaning tool. Now, what this tiny little shiv does is it gets inside the tip of your airbrush, which is the kind of thing that can build up a little bit of crusty paint and cause sputtering over time. It gets in there with that sharp edge, and it's not going to damage your airbrush needle tip, but it can kind of clean that out for you. They also sell these pipe cleaners for cleaning your airbrush, and they are nice, but I've honestly found these interdental cleaners to be more versatile and cheaper, and you can use them a couple of times and then use them on your teeth and throw them away. A fun thing to ask for in your stocking are some of the dirty down effects. They've got different rust effects, they've got moss, they've got verdigris, and they just came out with gore and snot. I have loved these things. So when you're wanting to knock out a bunch of models quickly and make them look nasty and gnarly, this is as close as you're going to get to talent in a bottle. I find that things for basing are great stocking stuffers because you can never have too many different kinds of fun things to try out on your bases. My current favorite basing tufts are by Gamer's Grass. I find myself using their tiny tufts all the time. I think I have about 4 or 5 different colors of these, and I use them in anything from just my army all the way up to golden demon pieces. Plus, they got a lot of weird different kinds of grasses and shrubberies and colors as well. We all know that the best thing to decorate our bases with are skulls, and there's no single better value product in the Games Workshop catalog than their box of skulls. Fits right in your stocking, and you can use a single box of this on one very skull-laden base, or 340 individual bases. Next, basing pastes are all the rage. I've got a bunch of different ones from different brands here. I have tried all sorts of stuff, and they are great just in general to have some basing pastes on hand. My current favorites, the ones that are my go-to right now, are AK Interactive's Muddy Ground. This stuff just kind of acts like muddy dirt that isn't totally grit, but if I want a full gritty kind of gravelly scene or rocky scene, the best foundation for that is Pro Acryl's fine basing texture. There's all sorts of weird versions with weird colors out there too, so even if you have some you like, you can always get a weird colored one. And the final category within a category that I want to talk about is things you've wanted to try, but you just haven't yet. Now, each of us is slightly different in this category, and I think the thing you should do is ask yourself, what is something that I've wanted to try using in the last year or so, but I haven't yet? I'll give you some examples. If you've never tried pigment powders yet on your bases and on the feet of your miniatures to make it look like they've been walking through the dusty environment, get a couple or even just one vial of pigment powder as a gift, and you can test it out, see if it's something you like. Next up are inks. If you've never used inks in your painting to create some really strong vibrancy or punchy colors, now's the time to try it. You can pick stuff up like Liquitex or FW ink at your local art stores, so your normie family can just go get whatever color you want to try, but there are different hobby brands as well. The last thing I would recommend you try, if you haven't, are enamel products. Now, these can create really amazing effects and grime across your models. I've got some videos on the channel where I explain how to use them, even though they're really user-friendly. You know, Villainy Inks recently came out with their own set, and I've really been enjoying them, but there are a bunch of other traditional brands that are great as well. Thanks for joining me on this little hobby holiday hangout video. I hope that you found something that you can add to your hobby list. And to make it easy on your loved ones, I put the links to everything that I talked about here down in the video description. And a good number of those links down there are affiliate links, meaning that they support the channel and help me continue to put out YouTube videos at no additional cost to you. So a big thank you for those of you willing to use those links. And if you happen to be feeling even extra generous this holiday season, the other thing you can do to support this channel is to consider joining the Ninjon Patreon. Links are below as well. For just a couple of bucks a month, you get to hang out with me on the Discord. You get some fun rewards for doing that, but more importantly, you are the big reason that allows this channel to keep putting out videos on such a consistent basis. And speaking of that, if you'll excuse me, I have to get to work using some of these tools on next week's video. And don't worry, I will be back 1 week from today with that video. Just make sure that sometime between now and then, you find time in your day to slay the gray.